me for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome. It's our favorite day of the week. It is Friday, which means we have Film Friday out right now, talking about the thriller, The Invisible Man. That's out right now in theaters. We saw that. We broke it down for you. Go check that one out. But bigger than that, you're listening to this podcast to talk about the American League Central Division in our baseball preview, counting down the weeks till the opening day. We're getting closer, guys. So, today we're breaking down the American League Central Division. And like we did with the American League East, that's already up. We did that one on Monday. We talk about the teams in alphabetical order, not necessarily the order we think they're going to finish at the end of the year. So, we talk about the Chicago White Sox, the Cleveland Indians, the Detroit Tigers, the Kansas City Royals, and your Minnesota Twins. So, let's get into it. I'm excited. The Chicago White Sox, Vegas has them at plus 300 to win the division. They are the third highest ranked team. They have the third best odds to win the division. This is a big deal coming after about a 3-year rebuild. The over-under for the Chicago White Sox is 83.5 games. So let's talk about them. The White Sox were the surprise team of last year, and they're building off that going into this year. They have higher expectations. Last year, the Southsiders came into the season a little bit rocky. We weren't really sure what we could expect from them. Slowly, they developed a star in Tim Anderson, a guy who we talk about all the time, it feels like. And when we go around the league and talk about the best players in the league, I don't think Tim Anderson is one of the best players in the league, but I think that he's one of the most marketable players in the league. And in 2020, I think that matters a whole hell of a lot. You got to have somebody who can sell jerseys, who can bring fans to the stadium. And this guy has turned into, either by accident or by chance or by luck or just skill, the way that he's been able to play the game, he has turned into the face of the youth movement in baseball. A guy that we thought might be the third or fourth best player in this division has now turned into the guy who I think most fans outside of the baseball realm would be able to recognize, mostly from his bat flips. I like that he has been so unabashed in his excitement for the game of baseball. It is refreshing to me to see a player like Tim Anderson who has been able to continue just to show how much he enjoys the game. We've all said before, everybody who's watched baseball has said before, that it's a child's game played by young men, played by adults. And the fact that Tim Anderson can take that childhood joy, can take that joy of playing a sport and really, I think, show it every single day for 162 games a year is incredible. There's very few professional athletes today who show how much they enjoy the game that they play. You turn on an NFL game, you might not see guys who are excited to be there. They're just trying to collect a paycheck. You turn on NBA games, there's guys who care more about their personal brands than they do about the game that they play. But in baseball, Tim Anderson has been, I think, one of the guys who has really shown that he enjoys playing ball. He just does. And whether you love him or hate him, whether you're an old guy who doesn't like the bat flips or a young guy who recreates them playing pickup with his friends, Tim Anderson's a guy who I think is just entertaining to watch. You got Jose Abreu holding down first base, and the Sox need to figure out their pitching staff. They're a pitching staff away from being a legitimate contender in the division. They have Garnell, the switch-hitting catcher, who made a splash last year. I like the way that he was able to come on the scene and really make an impact on the White Sox roster. I wasn't very... I will say this, that the White Sox are the team who I would be the most shocked if they didn't have an over, if they didn't hit the over of their projections. At 83.5 in this division, I think that they have a very good chance of hitting the over. They just need to figure out that pitching staff. All right, the other thing, like we mentioned in the American League East, and we do this for every single team, the player to watch. The player to watch for the Chicago White Sox, even though I wax so poetically about Tim Anderson, is Jose Abreu. he's the type of transformational player who can make an impact on any team. You can put him on any team in the American League and the National League, and he will be a cornerstone guy for you. He fits perfectly in the culture of the White Sox, and he is unlike the other stiff home run hitting first basemen who play his position. He is trying to fit into, I think, that new age of baseball where defensive stats matter, I think, a little bit more than batting average, which is shocking. You go throughout the history of baseball, very rarely were people picking up the paper and flipping to defensive stats and trying to figure out their fielding position. Very rarely did you pick up a paper and look at the fielding percentages for some of these players. But Jose Abreu has been an incredible player on the defensive side of the ball as well. I think that is an underrated part of his game. But offensively, he fits in perfectly. I think he'll be a very good 3 or 4 hitter for the White Sox. You put Tim Anderson as your leadoff hitter, and you fit a roster around those two guys. You have a roster who can score a couple runs. And in this division with the Twins, who last season I think redefined what it meant to be a boom or bust team, where they were hitting home run after home run after home run after home run after home run in the division, they need to figure out the pitching staff, like I mentioned. If they can figure out a pitching staff that is decent, say sub 4.5 ERA for the staff, I think that they can make a run not only at that division, but at the. I don't think they're going to win the division, but I think that they could be a wild card team. I think that if you're going to look at these teams, that they have the third best chance, just like Vegas says, of winning the division. Moving on to the Cleveland Indians. The Indians, a team only 4 years removed from playing in the World Series, being up 3-1 to the Chicago White Sox and blowing the lead. They come in with the second best odds to win the division, plus 240, I should say. Their over-unders at 86.5. Again, another team I picked the over for. Last year was a disappointing year, I thought, for the Indians. Terry Francona has revamped the roster. We talk about Terry Francona not nearly enough, because what he was able to do with that Red Sox team in the early 2000s to win a World Series, now he moves into Cleveland. He's been there for a little bit. They went to the World Series before. But when we talk about the best managers in baseball, when we talk about the best managers of all time, Terry Francona somehow, some way, continues not to be put in that conversation. And if the Cleveland Indians can not only play for a World Series, but win a World Series this year, and again, it's a really long road, that there's 162 games, there's about 7 months of baseball, it feels like, between March and September and October. There's a lot of baseball to be played. But if the Indians can put together a roster, and Francona can lead this roster as the manager, and he wins a World Series, not only with the Boston Red Sox, but now wins with the Cleveland Indians, and able to, look, they haven't won a title either in a long time, the Indians have. LeBron brings a title to Cleveland, and people just forget that the baseball team has been there longer than the Cavs have. Okay? If he can figure out a way to finagle a title for the Indians, he needs to be put in that conversation, I think, more. All of that said, I don't think that they have a good enough roster to win a championship this year. I say all that about Francona, but I still don't think they need to make some more roster moves, and they can do that mid-season. That's not impossible to do. They're not a good enough roster right now to win a World Series. Getting rid of Corey Kubler and Trevor Bieber last season, the Indians have a starting rotation that has much to be desired, I think. I think that when you look at their starting rotation, when you look at their rotation just in general, you're going to be scratching your head. Getting rid of those two guys last season was a money move. Okay, you knew you weren't going to win the title. You knew the Astros had a better rotation. You knew the Yankees were hitting home runs. You knew the Twins were running away with the division. So you moved off those two guys and save yourself some money. But now, again, 4 years removed from playing for a title. And you're kind of in the middle. We talked about the Rays on the American League East podcast, and I said the same thing I feel about the Rays, the same way I feel about the Indians, is that you're in the middle right now of being an excellent team and being an average team. The Indians have too much talent on that roster to be average, but they don't have enough starting pitching. They don't have enough bullpen pitching, I think, to be excellent. And so you're stuck in the middle. You're stuck in a spot that no Major League team really wants to be in. However, another stat that we mentioned before was that the World Series has been won by the wild card 7 times since 1995, when the wild card was put in place. So, that said, a team like the Indians, if they can get to the wild card spot, they have a chance to win the whole thing. You got to be in it to win it, right? If the Indians can find a way to get some starting pitching, either be from the farm system or trade for somebody or bring somebody in, they could be a legitimate team competing in the American League Central. But again, I still think that of all the teams, I like the White Sox the most to hit the over. I do like the Indians to hit the over as well. I feel like they are closer to an 88-win team than they are an 86-win team. So again, we're splitting hairs here a little bit, but I still am taking the over. I have too much faith in that roster. Not enough faith in the rotation, but enough faith in Terry Francona to will this team to 88 wins and hit the over. Player to watch, Roberto Perez, who has shown that he is one of the smarter young catchers in the game. After coming off of last season that was hot, he has a chance to make a big impact on this year's Tribe. He ranks 3rd by Baseball Prospects for pitch framing and has been really good at the plate as well. So Roberto Perez is the player that you need to watch for the Cleveland Indians. Moving on. This is a team that I hold near and dear to my heart, the Detroit Tigers. This team was competing for World Series earlier in the 2010s. They've kind of fallen off since then. It's very hard for me to see this team winning a ton of games this year. They've only had back-to-back 100-loss seasons once in their history, but I would not be shocked if this season made it 2. 2 times in the Detroit Tigers' history that they're going to have back-to-back 100-loss seasons. They have the worst odds to win the division at plus 5,000. Their over-under is 57.5 games. I am taking the under. They're going to be closer to 50 wins than they are to 60. This team, of the last 3 seasons, the Tigers have had 98 losses twice and lost a league-leading 114 games last year. Miguel Cabrera's Hall of Fame career is coming to an end, and it's a shame that he will be on a team with this many holes. Look, you can get a block of Swiss cheese that is more filled in than this Detroit Tigers team. The Tigers got stuck with a bunch of big contract guys and drowned underneath them. Look, this happens to a lot of teams. There's been teams all throughout Major League Baseball and professional sports who give big contracts to some guys who they think have a couple more years left in them. This happens more often than we probably like to admit, that our favorite team signs a guy who they think might be the type of dude that can turn the program around, might be the type of guy that can switch the culture up, might be the type of guy that can lead them to a title. The Tigers have swung and missed a lot on some of these big contract guys, and now they're facing the consequences. This is an unneeded diss to Jacoby Jones, okay? So this is a spraying of bullets to Jacoby Jones, who has one of the worst career WARs with over 100 plate appearances. You got a guy like that on your roster. When we talk about the history of baseball, it's a long history. People have been playing baseball since before the turn of the century. And when you have one of the worst WARs, wins over replacement, and you're an everyday starter, not a good look. Tigers fans can put their hopes in guys like Ronnie Garcia, who will likely play a big part and a big-time role in this weak pitching rotation. Pitching is a very important part of the game. If you haven't figured it out yet, that's something that I really judge a lot of these teams on. You got a guy like Severino for the Yankees who goes out with an elbow injury. You got a guy like Chris Sale who goes out with an elbow injury. Immediately, I'm going to reassess where I put that team. If Kershaw goes down for a month with a bruised ankle, or if Bumgarner decides to continue to be a rodeo clown, I'm immediately going to think less of that team. I'm going to immediately have more questions than answers when we talk about those type of teams. So, in this present day Tigers roster, I cannot tell you how disappointed I am in their pitching rotation. Ronnie Garcia is going to have to be a 15 to 20 win guy for the Tigers to even be in the conversation when we talk about what teams we want to see on television. Okay? I don't know what to do with this team. I think that they're going to be the worst team in the division. I don't think they're going to be the worst team in baseball because the Baltimore Orioles exist. I don't think they're going to be the most dysfunctional team in Major League Baseball because the Philadelphia Phillies exist. So the Tigers are going to be the team that bottoms out for the next 5 to 10 years. Let's go 5 to 7 years. They're going to be a middle to bottom of the pack team. And then by about 2025, 2028, in that time period, you're going to get them competing for a divisional title. Mark it right now. But the same way that we talk about the Orioles fans who are kind of checking in on the team right now, trying to figure out how do we feel about them, I will tell Tigers fans this. You're lucky not to be Baltimore Orioles fans because at least you have Miguel Cabrera. And his career's coming to an end, and this is one of the, if not 5, top 10 hitters of all time. That's saying something again. You got a guy like Jacoby Jones on your team who is one of the worst hitters of all time, one of the worst baseball players of all time, and then you got a guy like Miguel Cabrera in the same lineup as him, one of the best hitters of all time. It shows the duality of this roster build. Player to watch, Austin Ramiro is the stopgap before Jake Rogers figures it out in the minor leagues. Ramiro is good at calling games. He's defensive first catcher, which is rare in today's game. Everybody says around professional baseball that Jake Rogers is the next big thing in the minor leagues when it comes to catching. That he's going to be the type of player that's going to come in and really add a lot to the Detroit Tigers. But before he figures it out, you got Ramiro, who is going to, I think, be a very good trade asset in a couple years. He's a guy that fits the culture. He's a good young player. And again, if you're a Tigers fan, you get a chance to go to Comerica, if you get a chance to go to see a Tigers game, I would strongly encourage you to watch Miguel Cabrera's final few years because you only get a legend like that once in a lifetime. Moving on to another bad team in the division, we look at the Kansas City Royals, who, like the Tigers, not a lot of good things happening. After winning the World Series in 2015, Kansas City has struggled only to finish 500 once since then. So, take the Tigers, add a title to them, then you have the Kansas City Royals. This year won't be much different. With a pitching rotation that's barely average and not letting a lot of hitting go around, the Royals are the poster child for using analytics to win, but then cutting bait when it comes to being too expensive to keep everyone around. This is a problem that we've seen a lot in professional sports. I feel like this podcast has turned into more of a look back on how the American League Central Division really is a good mirror for how professional sports goes. Look, you get an analytical team. You look at a team like the Red Sox. You look at a team like the A's. And you look at a team like the Cubs. All really leaned into the analytics early. All prospered off of it. Everybody except the A's figured out how to win a title because of it. But when things got expensive, when players wanted a little bit more money, front offices don't like to hand out big contracts like that. Baseball's weird because it's one of those sports that you need to be looking not only 4 or 5 years down the road like you look in the NBA, you need to be looking 7 to 8 years down the road because of these. That's the length of a lot of these contracts. So a lot of general managers are kind of scared off by giving a 37, 38-year-old a couple $1 million more because we don't know how long they're going to last, especially when we look at pitchers. So the Royals poster child for that, where they had a team that won the World Series, they played in 2 World Series, they won 1, and then they just kind of cut bait on a roster that was very talented. And now they're kind of, again, stuck in the middle. Because they're not terrible, they're not bad enough to bottom out like the Orioles or the Tigers, but they're not very good either. And in baseball, when you don't have a generational superstar, when you don't have a face of the franchise, when you don't really have a lot to sell, it's going to be hard to get Kansas City fans into the stadium. Look, this is now the City of Champions. All right? The Chiefs just won the title. And a lot of these sports fans in the area are going to care, I think, more about NFL offseason moves. They're going to care more about what the Chiefs are going to do to repeat. They're going to care a lot more about what some of these other teams around the area are going to be doing than they're going to care about the Royals. I would not be shocked if the Royals had one of the worst attendances in baseball this year. I would not be shocked if the Royals had very bad regional viewers. And I would not be shocked if we didn't hear a lot about the Royals after the month of April. That they're going to be one of those teams that is really going to slip into obscurity. They're going to slip into and out of the public consciousness. Player to watch is Whit Merrifield, who's a speedy do-everything utility player that every team wants but no team can have. If you're the Royals, If you're the Royals, this and Steven Woods Jr., who's a pitcher, are the two guys you want to build around. Merrifield can play second base as well as center field, and scouts think he could steal 30 to 40 bases in a good year. So this is kind of the guy that you're really banking on if you're a Royals fan. I don't buy him. I think that they are a 64.5 win team when you look at the over-unders. I have the over because I don't think they're going to be terrible this year. I think they're going to lose more games than they're going to win. They're going to be below 500, but I think they're going to be closer to 65, 70 wins than they're going to be to 60. So I'm taking the over on 64.5. Last but not least, the team that Vegas thinks is going to win the division, the favorite to win the division in the AL Central at minus 150 with a 91.5 over under the Minnesota Twins. The Twins are the favorite in the division, much thanks to the boom or bust offensive strategy. Their starting pitchers had a 4.23 ERA last season, but when you're hitting 3 home runs every other inning, you can do that, which the Twins did. They had a ton of home runs last year. The biggest obstacle the Twins might have to face this season is Rob Manfred de-juicing the balls, which has been a constant topic that baseball fans and writers have talked about until the Astros decided to start banging on trash cans. And now we care less about the balls being juiced and we care more about what the Astros were doing. But before then, because unlike a lot of people, I have a memory that can go back more than 4 months, this is de-juicing the balls. The Twins have a fine starting rotation led by Jake Ordienzo and Jose Berrero, but the Twins don't have the starting pitching that you're looking for this offseason. The pitching will always be the thorn in the Twins' side. Look, as a guy who's watched the Twins for more years than I like to admit, the starting pitching has always been something of a sore spot, I think, for Twins fans. I don't think they've had a good pitching rotation since the early 90s. Look, this is a team who will go and spend a ton of money on a homegrown catcher. They'll spend a ton of money on a washed-up hitter. They'll spend more than enough money on a middle infielder. They will not spend a dime over the market value of any starting pitcher. They got Michael Pineda, who will miss the first 39 games to finish his 60-game suspension. The first month will be rough for the Minnesota Twins. If this team struggles early, do not be shocked. That is why I have them with the under on the 91.5. I think in April, they're going to be one of the middle-of-the-tier teams. I think that if people are talking about baseball in late April and they haven't already switched over to NBA playoffs, if they haven't really been focusing on March Madness, if there isn't a draft combine big story coming out, and news outlets care about baseball, I think the Twins are going to be one of the teams that they're going to talk about. Because I think in the first month, they're going to be very rough. It's going to be a tough time for the Minnesota Twins, and I don't think that that is going to derail them. I think they still win the division, but I think they're going to win the division at closer at 88 wins than they're going to be to 91. So still a very good win total, but I don't think 91.5 wins is doable for the Twins. Player to watch is Sergio Romo, is the type of pitcher that might help the Twins win in October. Now look, the Twins have lost more games to the New York Yankees consecutively than any team has lost to another team in the playoffs. The Twins have lost 16 consecutive playoff games to the New York Yankees. The Bronx Bombers have the number of the Twins like they have it memorized at this point. There has never been a time in my life where I've looked at a playoff matchup between the Yankees and Twins, and thought the Twins had a prayer. So for me to say that Sergio Romo could be the type of pitcher to help them win in October, that means the type of pitcher that can beat the Yankees, because that's who they're going to face in the playoffs. It's a guarantee. If the Twins win the division, hang a pennant, because that's about as far as they're going to go, I think. He has enough good pitches to fool batters. He could be the Twins' closer if everything works right for the team. Look, he's not going to be a guy that's going to be starting a lot of games. He's not going to be a guy that's probably going to start any games. But if the Twins can put themselves in a position to win games, he will be the guy to help them close games. The American League Central is, if not one of the most interesting divisions in baseball. I think they're going to be one of the better divisions to watch. I think they're going to be very fun to watch. I like the Indians, and I'm very excited to see what the White Sox can do. They didn't do a ton in the offseason, but I still like Abreu, and I still like what they've been able to build on the south side. Twins still win the division. I still think that they're going to be the team to beat. Tigers, Royals fans, I'm sorry. It's going to be a rough year for you. All right, that's going to do it for the American League Central Preview Podcast. I strongly urge you to listen to the American League East that we did on Monday. That's a really good one. Next Monday, this coming Monday, we have a very special guest coming on the podcast. We had him on the old show a lot, talking to us, but he hasn't been on this one yet, and I'm very excited for him to come on. Brendan Snow will be joining the podcast to talk to us about the AL West. He's going to be writing about the Texas Rangers this upcoming season, and I'm very excited for him for that. So he'll be talking to us about the American League West and what we can expect. Tune into that. Also, like I mentioned earlier, Film Friday, so you're going to want to check those podcasts out, talking about The Invisible Man, and of course, all of the content we've put out next week, American League West, and then we start the National League. Also, be on the lookout for a surprise, not much of a surprise anymore, but a pretty big interview I have coming this weekend. I'm going to plug it a ton. You're probably going to see it late Friday, early Saturday. That's what you need to be on the lookout for. We're talking about one of the greatest American athletes of all time, one of the 100 best football players ever. Very interesting stuff, very cool stuff coming your way. So, thanks for listening to the podcast. Please be on the lookout for all of our content. Please continue to send it to everybody, and I will see you guys next week.